Hi, third graders. Today we will read the Introduction to Living in Colonial America, which is the beginning of Unit 10. Before we begin, I have just a few vocabulary words I'd like to go over with you. The first word is time traveler. A time traveler is someone who travels back and forth to different points in time. The next word is creation, the act of making something new. Colonial, an area in another country settled by a group of people that is still governed by the native country. Distinct, clearly different from other things. Originally, which means at first, and homeland, the country where someone was born or grew up. Please read along with me as I read out loud. When we're done with the introduction, we'll take a quick break, go over some more vocabulary words, and then begin Chapter 1. Are you ready to go on an adventure? Are you ready to become a time traveler? I think I heard you say yes. Good, because you are about to travel back in time to meet some of the first Europeans who came to settle in America. You are going to learn about the creation of the 13 English colonies. You already know about the explorers who helped make this happen. Now you will learn about the brave men, women, and children who came to live in a new land. Some of the characters in the stories you are about to read are not much older than you. You will also discover that these colonies were divided up into 3 distinct regions. These regions are called the Southern, New England, and Middle Atlantic regions. English people and other Europeans came to these regions at different times and for different reasons. You will journey to one region at a time. Pay attention to which region you are in. Are you ready to become a time traveler? Be very careful though. Your mission requires you to move back and forth in time as you travel from one region to another. In each region, you will meet children who lived a long time ago. You will discover how different their lives were in comparison to yours. You might even wonder if you would have liked to live in America hundreds of years ago, when Europeans first began to settle here. For your journey, you will be given special time-traveling tools to help you along the way. You will have maps. Time travelers always need good maps. You will also have a timeline. As you time travel, you will find out where these European settlers originally came from, as well as how they journeyed to America. You will discover the reasons why they chose to travel so far away from their homelands. Are you ready to time travel? Good. Your adventure is about to begin. Time travelers use maps. Before we read Chapter 1, the first English colony, let me go over just a few more vocabulary words that you'll hear along the way. Successful. Reaching a goal you had. Galleon. A large sailing ship. Persuade. To convince. Would be. Hoping to be a particular type of person. Overgrown. Covered with plants that have grown in an uncontrolled way. Alarming, disturbing, or causing fear. Harshest, most difficult and unpleasant. Beg, to ask for money or food. Please read along with me as I read Chapter 1, the first English colony, out loud. Robert and George ran along the long stretch of sandy beach on Roanoke Island. From time to time, they splashed in the warm waters and collected shells. It was late August in the year 1587, and, if all went well, they and the other travelers would be the first successful English colonists in North America. They and others had watched as their leader, John White, sailed away. He was returning to England to get supplies they needed to survive on this island. However, the reason why the boys were playing on this beach began many years earlier. Robert and George playing on the beach on Roanoke Island. In the 1500s, Spain conquered large areas of Central and South America. The Spanish built towns and cities there. Spanish galleons sailed across the Atlantic Ocean laden with gold and other natural resources taken from these regions. Spain was becoming very rich. The Queen of England, Elizabeth I, and her favorite knight, Sir Walter Raleigh, wanted England to become as rich and powerful as Spain. They wanted English people to go to this new world too. In 1584, Sir Walter persuaded Queen Elizabeth to let him try to create an English colony in the Americas. It was decided that the English would stay away from the powerful Spanish conquistadors. Instead of sailing to Central or South America, they would sail north to North America. With that decided, a group of explorers set off to find a suitable place to settle. A group of English explorers prepared to sail to North America. The explorers who went on this expedition in 1584 reported back to Sir Walter and told him about Roanoke Island. They believed this island was a perfect place for the first English colony. Sir Walter's explorers managed to build a fort on the island, but they failed to create a colony. They abandoned their mission, leaving only 15 men behind to guard the fort. However, Sir Walter was determined to succeed. In 1587, more ships set out for the New World. Robert and George were members of this second group of would-be English colonists. They had been very excited to set off on this great adventure. This time, the colonists planned to land north of Roanoke Island in the Chesapeake Bay area. There, they hoped to establish the first successful English colony. Unfortunately, during the trip, there was a disagreement between their leader, John White, and members of the ship's crew. As a result, members of the ship's crew refused to take the English travelers to the Chesapeake Bay area. So, Robert, George, and the other passengers were forced to land on Roanoke Island in late July. Robert and George had not minded this change of plan. They had simply been happy to be on solid ground once more. However, this was not the end of the travelers' troubles. After landing, John White led a group of men to Fort Raleigh, the fort that had been built by the previous group. Robert and George had not been allowed to go with the men. At the fort, John White and the other men expected to find the 15 English soldiers who had been left behind to guard it. When they arrived at the fort, the soldiers were nowhere to be found. The fort was overgrown with weeds. The skeleton of one soldier was discovered. John White and his group found the fort overgrown with weeds and the skeleton of one soldier. When John White and the men returned to the beach with this news, Robert and George had felt scared. The boys were especially concerned when the adults suggested that the Roanoke Native Americans were responsible for the death of the soldiers. The only good news was that it was possible to repair the homes in Fort Raleigh. The settlers got to work. Robert, George, and more than 100 men, women, and children worked from sunrise to sunset to reconstruct these homes. However, no one spoke of the most alarming thing of all. When winter came, they did not have enough food to survive until spring. They had arrived at a time when it was too late to plant crops. Men, women, and children reconstructed the fort. Robert, George, and the others did not want to return to England, starving and exhausted. They wanted to succeed. They wanted Queen Elizabeth and Sir Walter to be proud of them. But they needed a plan. 1 month after they arrived, it was decided that John White would take one of the 2 remaining ships and return to England to get supplies. If all went well, he would be back before the harshest days of winter arrived. So Robert and George had watched and played as John White's ship sailed out of sight. The two boys remained on the sandy shore and enjoyed the freedom of this new land offered. Neither of the boys missed the busy, crowded streets of Portsmouth, England. They did not miss the rain or the sight of the poor people who begged on the streets. This was to be their new home, and they were thankful to be there. The question was, would they survive? Do you think the settlers survived? Does the colony survive? Does Roanoke Island become the first successful English colony in North America?